One of the biggest reasons of company shutdown is my mentor told me this. When you're looking to start up, make sure that you have 3 resources. Hey, I wanted to start up. I had a very cool idea. And there are so many of my friends. They don't have a complete handle of their finances, ended up spending more than what they were earning. Forget about investment. One of the major reasons why most people are poor is because of I always want to make sure that meeting starts on time.
So anyone who's late is not appreciated.
Is not appreciated.
Interestingly, I would like to point out.
I was late
for
today.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Cashvisory podcast. I'm Arpita, the co-founder of Cashvisory, and we are on a mission to bring every young professional to their first investments. Today we have here Sachin Jaiswal, who is the co-founder and CEO of kim.cc. From being a techie at IIT Kharagpur to becoming a serial entrepreneur, he has had an incredible journey. Let's hear from him.
Hello, Arpita. Thank you for having me in this podcast. I'm Sachin. I have about 13 years of career, and I think I've seen a bunch of things from a PM at a really slow-moving company, Oracle. I started my journey around 2011 at Oracle from IIT Kharagpur, and then I was there for the first 6 months. In the first 6 months, I realized that it is not something that I want to be there in the long term. Like the biggest discovery there was they used to take 18 months just to do a testing for a new version upgrade. Imagine 5.1 say 5.2 ka launch. They used to take 18 months, and I realized this is too slow paced for me. That's when I decided that we will start something of our own. And it was around that time that Abhinav came to me saying that this is something that he's thinking about with Innovator, and I just jumped in. And that was the start of my startup journey. And I don't think I ever thought about any financial planning to start this. It was just an impulse, and I just went ahead and jumped right in. From someone who came from middle class, didn't have a lot of savings. It was a big leap, but I did not think twice. I think since then, I have pretty much led my life with startups. This Innovator happened in December 2011. That's when we discussed the idea, and then I think it took us about 8 months. August 2012 is when we all came full time, and so Innovator was a very, very difficult and tough journey because it was a bootstrapped startup. You don't hear that a lot these days now that there is funding available for startups, but it was bootstrapped, and we bootstrapped it from zero to about a couple of millions in revenues in a span of 2.5-3 years. We were completely comfortable in that stint. So that was the start of Innovator. We had seen days where we had to make sure that we do X number of sales so that we can pay salaries to our employees at the end of the month. And from there, after about 2 years, we raised capital. We raised about $1 million across a bunch of investors. So that was in the journey with Innovator. After that, I quit that to start another company, Nikki.ai. AI was not hot in those days. We were the first commercial chatbot. And so we built Nikki back in 2015 and took it to about $52 million in sales through the platform. There we had seen days where we were almost 1 month of runway, and we are about to shut down, and then from there steer the company to a successful fundraise and then continue the journey. So we have seen those days. With Nikki, the mission was to make internet services accessible to the masses of India. As we called it Bharat. So we were building something like a Ramu Kaka where people could just speak and access internet services. And the idea was largely a result of the pain points that we saw back home. Like my dad was struggling with internet. He didn't know how to order groceries. He used to search on YouTube, bolkar videos mangate the. And he used to also search on Google Maps. He used to navigate by using voice. And there was a pattern that we saw and said that there is a technological breakthrough that is happening, and this is a new market that will get started. So that was the genesis of Nikki. And we wanted to make people like my dad access internet services. So that was the idea. However, the company shut down in 2021 around the midst of COVID. And after that, I was briefly a part of Swiggy, where I was leading customer service and had built their platform for customer support. And then from there on, continued my journey with kim.cc with the mission of making great customer service accessible to all businesses. So yeah, it's been quite
the journey.
Quite a diverse journey. And I think one thing that has stayed with me through the whole journey is like I firmly believe in the power of technology and its application to build businesses at scale, which is why seen that with Innovator, where we had started from literally nothing to now quite a big company.
Yeah.
The company built a product that could actually scale to quite a large number of users. With Nikki, we saw the similar journey where we had scaled to about $52 million in sales happening through the platform. We had a few million users using the app. Yeah, now we see this as being commonplace. There are so many companies from Cred to Zerodhas of the world and doing millions of transactions. So I feel that tech has actually disrupted quite a number of sectors here in India, and it's still scratching the surface. And I feel that there are so many more businesses that will be built out of India.
So Innovator is now a healthcare unicorn. How did you spot this niche of analytics in healthcare?
Well, actually, I don't. A lot of people don't know this, but the journey with Innovator was not necessarily healthcare. We had started off when we were bootstrapped. We were offering analytics services to academia, which means professors from Harvard, Wharton, Stanford, etc. They used to use our services to do a research. For example, a professor in Harvard, in Wharton, wanted to do a research on all the into how M&A actually impacts competitive landscape. And to do that, they used to mine text data and figure out which ones talk about M&A, and then find out patterns that does M&A lead to any competitive consolidation and so on and so forth, and look at patterns from there on. So those are the kind of projects we used to do. And from there on, realized that actually that was also one of the reasons why we got the idea of Nikki. Back then, chatbots were not very commonplace, but I saw what natural language processing could do, and we thought that we could leverage that to build a chatbot. But anyway, coming back, we used to do analytics at Innovator, specifically for researchers, and then realized that we can apply this to healthcare. And of course, the biggest discovery of that pivot from academia to healthcare was the scale of projects that we used to get. At Innovator, in the early days when we were bootstrapped, we used to struggle to get like 20-30 to close 20-30 projects in a month. And all of these were, of course, pennies, because one project was probably we have done projects worth about $300 back in those days. And
humble beginnings.
And yeah, of course, because we had quite a large scale company, we had quite a few number of people. So from there, we had to close n number of projects to be able to pay salaries. And then when we pivoted to healthcare, one project could get 10 million in revenues a year. So we saw that the sheer ROI of building for a corporate was much higher, and that I think that was the genesis behind that pivot, moving from academia.
I think that's an interesting pivot, and I think pretty much the customer demand does decide where the business is going. Another thing that decides the course of the business is customer service and customer feedback, actually, which is not what your current startup is about. So at least for our startup journey, and that you've been through our journey, it's always been drilled into us that listen to your customers. Customer feedback will tell you what product to make, what where the business will be going. So I think that directly translates into providing the best customer service as you become a business, as you've figured out that product market fit, and this is the service that you want to provide. So coming back to your current startup, what was the inspiration behind building this one?
So believe that customer service is one of the cornerstone of businesses, and especially growing businesses. It's do or die. I realized this during my days at Nikki when we were offering customer support. When we were building the company, there was a moment where we had suddenly scaled because there was some promotional campaign that we did, and we got to probably 50x scale in that 1 week. And suddenly there was a backlog of customer support inquiries, and we could not answer them in time. And I think our ratings fell down. App Store rating, Google Play Store rating rather, it fell down from 4.9 to 3-star, and we could not recover.
That's drastic.
And I think even after like 4 years of hard work, where we kept soliciting customer support, customer feedback, etc., etc., and after 4 years, we were at best able to get it back to 3.8 star. I think the biggest realization from there was that a good customer service can actually deliver a great customer experience, and therefore can get you more customers. On the contrary, a bad customer support experience, or rather a bad customer experience, can be completely lethal for your business. Yeah. And like we did not recover from that drop even after 4 years. And I realized that this is something that most growing businesses face. And it made sense that we build an enterprise-grade customer support platform, which I saw at Swiggy, and provide that to all growing businesses. So that was the genesis behind Kim.
So yeah, Innovator was bootstrapped at first, and then you raised funds, and the last two startups are venture funded. I think many founders struggle to manage their personal finances while they're bootstrapping their businesses, and we've both been through that journey. I have also started Cashvisory bootstrapped before we raise funds. So what are the key financial principles you would suggest founders should follow, especially while bootstrapping?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, and I believe that I don't think I prepared myself financially when we jumped in full time. As I was mentioning earlier, that when we started Innovator, I didn't come from a very rich family. We were probably lower middle class, and to the extent that when I was at Oracle, we used to. I didn't rent an apartment because it required a lot of deposit at the start, and I had just started my career in the first month, and it didn't make financial sense either. So I was staying in a PG, and so that was the background that I was coming from when we had started Innovator. But still, I didn't blink an eye when we had to take this step of starting up. And everything that I'm going to say about starting up and the risks, the financial risks it involved, it comes with a caveat that whatever you do financially, you can be very well prepared. But when it comes to startup, it is just like jumping into a swimming pool and just trying to figure out how to swim. With that caveat, I would still like to point out that you can be better trained as you're learning how to swim. If you know how to move your hands around, if you know how to move your legs around, it will be a much easier journey. You won't drown.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, I mean, it is super important that you are better prepared financially. And I think in hindsight, now I know this journey. When I started, I made sure that that I had X months of runway, personal runway, when I started up, because I know that a startup journey is, and that X months is usually a 2 years runway. This is something that was told to me by by a VC. He said, and not just VC. In fact, Vivek from Licious, he was also saying the same thing, that whenever you're looking to start up, make sure that you have 2 years of runway. And once you do that, you can take that financial risk. And that is something that I actually took to heart when I was thinking about this startup journey. That case in point, there are so many things that are uncertain in the journey. So if you are financially prepared, the journey becomes slightly easier. There is one less uncertainty that you have to deal with. The other financial principle that we started when we're starting up that we considered is um, that make sure that your costs are less than what you're going to earn in this journey. And I think there are two ways to be better prepared financially. One is, of course, that you plan your runway, but also you plan your cash flow, right? Which was the second key thing that I did. So in this journey, I made sure that that we don't increase our costs a lot. And I think you've seen the setup, but like we don't have a lot of costs personally, which increases our risk appetite to be able to take the financial leap, to be able to take the startup leap financially. So because we don't have a lot of costs, it is much easier for us, and we actually took those decisions to be able to start this third venture. But I don't think I thought about it when we started Innovacer. It was just a leap of faith, and we figured things out. And I think at the end of Innovacer, when I quit, I actually made some money. So it was, in hindsight, it worked out. And when we started Nikki, I had some cushion from the money that I made at Innovacer, and then then we had raised venture funding. So it also made that journey a little easier. We still had to figure out and go through the maze to figure out what is the product market, how does the product market fit work out, and how do you get to distribution, how do you acquire customers, and so on and so forth. But this was one less puzzle to really solve when we were going through that uncertainty.
I think for bootstrapped business, I think frugality is one principle everyone lives by, and it's kind of, I would say that in that stage is kind of simpler also, because you don't really have that many different options. You're like, just spend less, right? So that's bootstrapped. And then Innovator today, it has raised somewhat north of 500 million. I think only in a founder's life you would see these two extremes in such a short span of time, right? Like from being like having almost nothing to having just this unlimited source of funds, right? And many startups actually struggle because there is a gap in founders' understanding of a company's financial health, which actually leads them to make all kinds of wrong decisions, and we are aware of all the things going on in the ecosystem without naming names. But how important you think it is to oversee a company's financial health, and especially for early stage startup founders, what are the key metrics that they should always have an eye on to ensure good financial health and a sustainable long-term business?
Yeah, I think the major ones that we look for is what is the runway. I think, in fact, I'll take a step back. The one key job role of a founder / CEO is to make sure they never run out of money. And by the way, like we give money a lot of importance in today's day, but I feel that money is just a tool to make whatever you want possible, and that's it. Like that's the only function of money. If you learn how to use this, how to manage this wisely, you will be able to get your dreams, for example. And it applies for both personal and professional lives. Let's say if you are a startup founder, you want to be able to raise Series A. You should have X months of runway, usually more than 24 months of runway, to be able to give yourself enough shot to get to product market fit. Similarly, if you want to be able to go public, you need to have a disciplined cash flow, so that you are able to make the public investors happy, right? And like we are seeing so many companies from Zomato's to Paytm that have gone public, and they were not prepared for this financial whirlwind, and they saw bunch of trouble, but some of them successfully navigated through that, right? And I think at least in the founder's journey, it is super important that you are able to manage your cash flows, and you're able to manage your, I would say, not just cash flows, but manage your finances. It could mean profitability, it could mean runway, but at the end of it, you should give yourself enough shots to be able to achieve success, right?
Right.
And I think, as I mentioned again, in a seed funded company, your next milestone is Series A, and in a growth company, it is IPO.
Yeah. And you must have runway until then.
You must have runway until then.
Absolutely. So, but how do you prioritize spending, right? Because, and especially in early stages when the funds are so super limited, and I can share the challenges we faced early on. It was whether to hire someone or just do it yourself, because there's also a cost which is not a monetary cost when you're doing it yourself and saving that money, right? Or whether you are building this or outsourcing this, having it in house. So there's all these kinds of things that come in. How would you suggest early stage founders go about prioritizing these?
It's a valid question. When you're bootstrapped, you are time rich, money poor. Okay, and therefore all the decisions that you take are based on that. So, which means, let's say if you do something in house and it's going to cost you, say, X, versus if you outsource it, it is going to cost you 2x, then you will do it in-house because it is more cost effective. When you are funded, you start looking at ROI. If you are to do this in-house, and it's going to take you, it's going to cost you X, but it is going to take you twice the amount of time because you have to learn everything. Yeah. Then you would not want to, do it in-house because the cost of that learning is very high. And because you have a limited runway of, say, 2 years, you need to be able to give yourself enough shot, which means that you need to optimize for time as well in that funded journey.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that you get to that quickly.
Yeah.
So it is going to be a fine balance between the money that you're spending for a particular service versus the time that it would take to otherwise.
I think one thing I've found really helpful in deciding is what is core business. What is something only I can do? Mm-hmm. If it's going to be learning how to read agreements or make agreements myself, I don't think that's my core business. So that's something I would be okay to spend money on. Of course, find the most affordable services for that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's one thing that I found really helped. But when it comes to budgeting, any methods that you particularly follow to keep the business finances, operating costs, or overall expenses in check?
So working backwards from the goal is usually something that has helped. And yeah, I think we have seen budgeting in the bootstrap days where there was nothing called a budget. Whatever is needed to survive was the plan. And we had seen this in our funded days, and like we've gone, we have seen both sides of that journey where we were so frugal that even when we had raised money, we were, I think our first funding at Nikki was about 125K, and when we had raised that money, we had built a team of about 20 people back then. And we still had a runway of more than 2 years. And we were very frugal in those days. And we would make sure that we measure every penny that we spend. And then from there, seen the journey where, with the 1 million raise, we were spending more on just the office. Like we were spending more than the cost of 20 employees back then.
Right.
So you've seen both those sides of the journey, and I think at different points in time of the company, there are different decisions and choices that you make. There is no right or wrong choice. It is just that, like I mentioned, at the end of it, whatever helps you get to that next milestone is the way that you prioritize.
Right. So besides being a serial entrepreneur, you are also an advisor to multiple startups. And so you, of course, and you've been in the ecosystem for almost more than a decade now. So you have exposure to all these different problems that are being solved by tons of different startups, especially being in Bangalore. What kind of, need do you see for, the gap that Cashvisory is filling, and what is the pressing need that we are solving, and how much do you relate to it personally?
Well, I think I relate to this problem statement, and I think when you had reached out on LinkedIn, the problem statement resonated with me because I was going through the same trouble. I remember when I had made some money at Innovator, I actually put that money into someone sold me an LIC bond and some other insurance bond. And I think those are some of the worst investments that I made.
Yeah.
And when you have very little financial knowledge, you are duped by people. And I was duped by, a friend of mine. And like the one of the major reason why most people are poor is because of the financial choices you make. And I don't think it's just me. Even my parents, they never invested. Like when they had money, they used to keep it in their locker at their home.
That physical locker at home.
Locker at home.
Okay.
Or they would put it in a savings account because they, if that money disappears, that is a more of a fear for them. And disappears doesn't mean that the investment will get wiped out. It is just that if the money is not there accessible to them, that is a mental fear that they had, and they never actually invested that money anywhere. And when I looked at the cost of not making that investment, I feel that alone made moved them from what would have been a upper middle class to a lower middle class. That makes a lot of difference, right? Yeah. I mean, money not invested in 20 years will become 1/8 of what it is of its actual value, and because there is inflation, and so if you had X amount of money in 2000, by the time it is 2020, your money's worth will be 1/8 of that.
Yeah.
Which means that that most, and this is something that happens at most households in India, right? Like people who are smart enough to deploy their money are able to get to their dreams very, very comfortably, very easily. But people who don't, and I've seen that that side of the journey, I feel that they struggle to actually achieve their dreams. It's not that we had any issue in our regular day-to-day stuff, but then some dreams, some aspirations that our parents had were unfulfilled, partly because of the way that they were managing their money.
Yeah.
And simple things, like for example, they wanted a home, and they could not afford to buy a home because they were not managing their money well.
Yeah.
That money, if they had invested even in a very safe financial instrument, let's say if they had invested in even a liquid fund, for example, it would have been enough for them to buy a home today. But they never did. They just kept their money either in the locker or in a savings bank account, and they just could not buy their home. Finally, now they have, but now I help them. But basically, those financial decisions make a huge impact into whether or not you're able to get to your aspiration.
Yeah.
And these things we take for granted, but in it compounds.
Yeah. I think that's something that people are not able to project. And usually you will see that a lot of people who save a lot of money, they feel they are doing it right. So they can continue to save, and they feel that because the quantum of the savings is growing, they're getting closer to their goal. And we always tell people that if you're just saving, then you are getting farther and farther away from your goal, and you just don't know it. It's only after 20 years you'll realize that you're not even halfway there.
Yeah.
Right? So it's really, the right sort of financial decisions right from day one that people need to have. And a lot of it is, I think, of course, lack of knowledge, lack of guidance, which is why we brought Cashvisory into the picture, and which is the conversation we were having that so I remember we had our chai point meeting, and I firstly didn't know that this is a problem you're facing yourself, right? And it was more on startup advisory, and I had reached out to you for that. And then I figured out that the reason our problem statement actually struck a chord is something that, you were facing yourself. And then you got started with your investment. So would you like to share your experience of getting started? What are the things you had to learn? And because, one interesting thing I just want to point out, I personally felt was that, as an entrepreneur, I would put you in a box of a risk taker, right? I would always imagine that people who take risks in business, in life, do bungee jumping, these people can take all kinds of risks, but that's totally not true. Taking risks in investments is, or a certain type of risk appetite with your money is very different from taking risk in your career or in life or anything else. So where does, how does that happen within you? How do you feel about investments or taking risks with money, and what are the things that you needed to learn before you got started?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I would start by answering this part of the question that yes, entrepreneurship is a risky deal, and I think people call it a lottery because at the end of it, it can be either a 1 or a 0. And like case in point, Innovator became a unicorn while Nikki shut down, and that is a typical startup life. And I think because you are taking such a concentrated risk in this part of your life, you don't want to take the same risk across every part of your life, right? So like the biggest fear that I had was me running out of personal funds, and I think part of the reason I made some of the, for example, I had a good chunk of money lying in my bank account and I just wanted it to be in my bank account in my Nikki days, just because I wanted mental peace. I did not want to invest it anywhere. I did not. And I think I understand the psyche that my parents also had. My dad also had. He was also an entrepreneur. And, this applies very strongly that if you are taking a huge risk where it's a 0 to 1, you would usually be very, very wary in your personal finances. And you don't want to take that risk. And which is part of the reason I did not take that risk. And I think that was completely flipped in my Swiggy days. I was making good amount of money on a month-on-month basis, and it just increased my risk appetite. And I think because of that cushion that I had, I was able to plan what are the 10 aspirations that I would have, and allocate finances to it, right? And again, it is so weird that one of the most important tool of today's day and age is requires mathematical skills to be able to maneuver. Because if like I know for my parents it's very difficult to understand compounding and to be able to understand the impact of inflation on their wealth, right? But this is the harsh reality that that most people don't understand the impact of compounding. They don't understand this mathematical jargon, and as a result, they are poorer or they become poorer. Like I've seen that in my parents' journey, and I think that is one of the reason. But anyway, I digress. One of the reason why I never bothered to invest is because I just wanted some mental peace while I'm taking this concentrated risk in my life, and. But yeah, I mean, if I so actually coming back to the discussion, I mean, I think the biggest thing that resonated with me in that journey when we had reached out was that the ability to plan your finances better, right? And I didn't realize, but through that journey of about 3 to 6 months, I became sound enough to be able to give that same advice to a few other peers, to my ex-colleagues, on how to plan their finances better. And like a lot of them, they take those risks. For example, starting up is a risk that people take, and like they asked me, what should I do? How should I plan such that I am able to start up? And because it's such a huge risk, right? When you're starting up, and I saw this same example with another peer of mine who started up, and like they had a lifestyle to keep up to, and they would find it a struggle to be able to afford that lifestyle just because they had started up. And in fact, there was another senior of mine from IIT Kharagpur who wanted to start a venture fund of his own, but could not take that risk just because he was not able to convince his family to adjust their lifestyle.
Wow.
And so like these are very, very crucial decisions that people have to take if they're looking to start up. And like that experience helped me understand these things better, right? And like starting up is just one example, but let's say if you want to buy a house, for example, right? What do you need to be able to plan for that? If you want to, let's say you want to study abroad, what do you need to plan for that? All of these things are actually financial costs, and it requires a little bit of planning, some bit of mathematical jugglery, and it's super important that this tool be available and accessible to most people. And I think that was my experience with Cashvisory. I think although I make fun of the rocket quite a bit,
must you mention?
but I think one thing that I find very, very very, very fascinating, and I actually enjoyed using the tool because it helped me. It took a bunch of inputs of what my current financials are, about how much I was making, and then how much I have saved. And from there, it was able to spit out what are the things that I need to do. For example, like the simple thing that it pointed out that I don't have a term insurance.
Yeah, I was coming to that. Actually, you bought your insurance after.
Yeah, I bought my term insurance after that, and something as simple as that people are not aware of.
Yeah. And they don't understand the importance of isolating their risk from the growth, that, how they need to manage their risk first before they actually put money in the growth.
Yeah. And like that was, again, like a super, super crucial insight that I got, because, one of the primary reason I kept my money in the bank account for about 5 years, all the money that I had in the bank account for 5 years, because I could not take that risk.
Yeah.
But then the answer to that was very simple. It was, again, a mathematical concept, a financial concept, rather, I would say, that I need to have an emergency fund. As long as I have that emergency fund, I can take the risk.
You're good to go. Yeah.
Yeah, you're good to go, and that's it. And that emergency fund could be as much as 6 months. It doesn't have to be your entire
life's earnings. Yeah, exactly, right. I think what people don't realize when they look at things like insurance also, which covers their risk, is, sometimes they feel that if I'm going to pay this much for insurance, I can just accumulate that amount. It's not just the amount that you compare. You also have to compare the impact it has on your peace of mind, because that's the peace of mind that actually enables you to go out and invest and take the highest risk possible in the market, right? So I think the skills right there is it's something that you need to build in yourself, which can be built, which I've seen a lot of people. I've seen you're not invested, in fact made some not great choices, and then getting back on track, starting your investments, getting your insurance. So I think it's never too late for people listening to us. Please get started. Now coming back to how similar do you think is managing personal finance versus managing a company's financials?
I think very similar. At the end of it, you should have a runway.
In life or in business,
in
absolutely.
life or in business, you need to have a runway. You need to know your cash flows. What is it that you're earning and what is it that you're losing? And it's, again, similar. You in business, you make a profit. If you make a profit, you are sustainable. In personal life as well, if you are not losing more than what you earn, you're good to go. I think, and it's also very, very easy for you to just lose your way. Once you buy a credit card, you have no idea how much you spend.
Or UPI, for that matter. I don't think people even realize that until they check balance.
Yeah. I mean, but still, it's slightly easier. If you have credit card, you typically end up you don't know how much you've spent until you get the bill at the end of the month. Versus if you are spending from your bank account,
at least you can check balance once in a while.
Even if you don't check balance, you don't have to check your balance. HDFC messages make sure that you are reminded of how much balance you have at the end of
where you stand.
Or where you stand after every transaction, right? And that insight alone makes you cautious of how much you're spending. Once you use a credit card, for example, you just lose sight of that profitability, of personal profitability. Or rather personal cash flows, and people end up spending more. And this is a situation that is so prevalent in US. You meet 3 people, and one out of the 3 would be going through a credit card struggle, that they have some debt that they have to figure out how to pay. And part of the reason is not having visibility on your personal profitability or personal cash flows. And I think it just puts you into a cycle where you keep spending. I think a lot of these folks in US, they spent 10 years in just trying to pay back the debt.
And it really hurts your credit score, first of all. So the real important loans that you need to take, which is your home loans and all, you're not able to even get there, even if you've built the deposits. And I think
one thing to add, there is impact of not being able to do that, right? For example, if you spend 10 years in in just paying off a bill. There were dreams and aspirations that you kept on hold. For example, you wanted a startup, you could not because you have bills, you have debt to pay. And there are so many people here in India as well who take education loan and they have startup aspiration, but they don't end up starting up because they have those loans to pay. There are so many people who on a month-on-month basis don't know how much they're spending, and at the end of the month they end up saving nothing because they don't get visibility of their finances on a day-to-day basis. And because of that, they keep cribbing that, hey, I wanted to start up, I had a very cool idea, and there are so many of my friends, but they could not, just because of that, just because they didn't plan their finances well. And there are people who, for example, wanted to go abroad to study, but they could not just because they didn't, plan their finances on what they were earning. There are folks that I know who wanted to buy a house, could not because they don't have a complete handle of their finances and ended up spending more than what they were earning. Forget about investment. And like these examples are like right to your face, right?
Yeah, real life, everybody around us. These are the normal people around us. And another thing I feel is that, buying things on EMI, I just never get the hang of it. Why would you do that? Because you don't have visibility on how that adds up. If you have 5 items you bought over a period of few months, at the end of the year, you would be paying EMIs for 5 items and you don't have a record of that or projection of that, unless you have been maintaining very diligently, which no one has the time to. So these things do get in the way of achieving your dreams, and most people, especially youngsters today, don't realize, especially if they're living in today, right? So they want to have the latest iPhone and they feel that was their dream. That's just consumption, because once you have that iPhone, then you want the next thing. But the actual dreams of education or business, like you said, or getting a home, these are the dreams that go unfulfilled. So that's definitely, I think, something.
Short term versus long term.
Short term versus long term. I think then short term is not even aspiration. I think that's purely consumption. You just see the next cool thing. And coming back to, again, personal finance, how do people keep a separation between personal finance and business financials, and a clear separation, especially when it comes to bootstrapping, right? Because there you kind of don't even draw salary, because essentially it's your own money. So that's your own money. This is your own money. Is there any practical tips that you followed?
Well, firstly, we made sure that we draw salary even when we are bootstrapped.
You did? Okay.
And like part of the reason, and a lot of founders who go into this journey, they think that because this is your company, this is bootstrapped, you don't want to draw salary. But it's actually quite the reverse. If you go through this journey, and if your personal finances is cash flow negative, then it impacts your psyche, your mindset, and it impacts your risk taking ability. And I think, and like a salary you should at least aim for a comfortable salary, and that, like, the first and foremost goal when you start up is being able to draw a comfortable salary, and you should do whatever it takes to be able to get there. Either you get enough revenues, get to enough profit so that you're able to draw a comfortable salary. And I've seen my wife, she bootstrapped her way into this current journey. And in the early days, it was tough for her to be able to think about spending on basic things as well. Like, she was very, very conservative when she started up, and then from there, being able to get to in a position where you are at least able to not worry about your personal expenses is super critical.
It's definitely.
And I think this is again something that we take it for granted, and we sacrifice this personal needs as well, right? And which is something that I think founders should not do. It's a very unhealthy practice. While you should not be making yourself rich, even if you're funded, you should not draw so much salary, but you should draw enough so that you're able to meet your expenses, and that enough will make sure that you have a mental peace. And you'll be able to take risks in the business so that the business can grow. And I think sometimes it is the investor mindset. Investors don't want the founders to draw a salary.
No salary at all.
Or no salary at all. And sometimes there are some bad investors, and then there are some good investors who want their founders to be comfortable financially, because they know that this is a long and arduous journey.
Exactly.
Right?
I feel it actually would hurt if the founders are not drawing salary, because one day if a situation arises where I need money, I would have to leave this and go look for a job. And
by
what
the way,
happens to your startup then?
That
if the
happened
founder
in our
leaves?
startup. Like at Nikki, one of the reason we shut down was because like amongst the founders, we had increased need for money. Partly because some of us got married, partly because whatever reasons, right? I mean, I won't get into the reasons, but basically it leads to founder fatigue.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest reasons of company shutdown is this founder fatigue. And making sure that a founder's salary is decent is the easiest part of the job, is the easiest thing to do in running a startup.
Just do that.
Yeah, just do that. Just do that and don't worry about anything else.
Okay. What's the most rewarding moment you had as an entrepreneur?
I think there's been many. From being able to start a business and make it sustainable in my first venture. And of course, it required a lot of learning a lot of new skills, from selling, going to US customers, to executing projects. All of those were skill set I didn't have, but we had to learn on the go, and we did. It was a fantastic experience. And then bringing a new product to life with Nikki, something that did not exist back then. Chatbot as a concept didn't exist in 2015. Now everyone is building a chatbot,
but
thanks
you were the
to
pioneer.
OpenAI.
Right? Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, when we started, it didn't exist as a commercial product, and I think bringing that to life was again something that that was a proud moment. But these are some of the top of mind.
And how do you recharge or keep up your motivation in the down times, the challenging times, which happen quite a lot in the startup?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I mentioned this, right? That we had seen days where we just had like a couple of months of runway.
We had seen that too.
I'm sure most founders will see that in their lifetime, because managing cash flow, and of course, what that means when you have 1 month of runway is you're staring at a shutdown. And it's super scary, right? But I mean, that is part and parcel of a founder's journey. The best advice that I got, this was from Let's Venture founder, was make sure that you have a community over and above your startup. So your startup is not everything. It's super important as a philosophy. And because of that, I have a bunch of friends who think what I'm doing is not
not that big a
deal.
Not
world changing. Is not that big a deal, and which keeps you humbled. And that circle is the reason that I whenever I'm going through any personal situation, so in any startup situation, it just helps me cope up with it. I have a mentor who / executive coach who I go to whenever I have any struggle that I'm dealing with and I don't know how to resolve it. So these are some of the things that I've seen which or have done, which make sure that I recharge whenever I go through any particular situation. And those structures has helped me. Apart from that, of course, like on a day-to-day basis, de-stressing ke liye we usually either go for a walk or go meet family and these things, or go out for a dinner or / read a book.
Non-startup related, but wouldn't that be challenging since your wife is also an entrepreneur?
Well, it is, but we make sure that we still do talk about our startup as well when we go out, for example. But we still tend to enjoy those experiences, so that helps de-stress.
Yeah. A pivotal decision that significantly changed your career path?
Jumping into the startup, my first startup, Innovator. I think till then, doing a startup was something that I wanted to do. But when this decision came to startup, I didn't think twice, and I just let's get started. That, of course, changed my entire
course of
course of the career. Another one was, I think, being able to plan my finances has also helped quite a bit in this startup journey, because I was able to, now that I had an experience of what it means to be able, what is required to be able to plan, to be able to take these leap of faiths. It just made me a lot more comfortable, a lot less stressed when taking the
better
risk.
Prepared, and you can kind of expect the unexpected at times.
Yeah,
definitely. Any biggest pet peeves in business meetings?
My pet peeves in business meetings, I always want to make sure that the meeting starts on time.
So anyone who's late is not appreciated.
Is not appreciated.
Interestingly, I would like to point out
I was late
for
today.
the meetings that we have usually, but I guess it's always because you've been overrunning from the previous meeting, so all forgiving. One trait every entrepreneur must have.
I think having fun. This is something that is underappreciated. But I think, especially considering how stressful an entrepreneur life is, and I've seen so many billionaires going through this, including billionaires. I won't say only billionaires, but including billionaires. So many startup founders going through this journey of mental instability, surely because of the amount of stress that they go through in their life. And like some of the most important common ones that we know of includes Mu Sigma founders and so on and so forth. It is super important to be able to, have fun, and because this is a long journey. You're most likely going to be spending around 7 to 10 years trying to see this vision to some reality, and sometimes even after spending 6.5 years, you don't see that coming to reality like we did at Nikki. But it's super important to have fun along the way. And I think thankfully, because we had started up with friends, people who we knew of, the journey was a lot easier. But yeah, I mean, irrespective, it's super important that you have fun.
No, I personally feel that way too, because I know at the end of it could be everything or it could turn into nothing. So I just do want to just enjoy every aspect of it, the earnings and the learnings. Best piece of advice you've ever received? You can include our advice from Cashvisory, but no.
I think my mentor told me this. When you're looking to start up, this is the advice that he gave me. Make sure that you have 3 resources. One is the capital that you need, or the money that you need to get started. The second one is the team that you need to get started. And the third one was the idea or the direction that you need to get started. And I think that made, again, my startup journey slightly more easier. Because I knew I had my milestones.
A sense of direction, I think.
A sense of direction.
That's important, because otherwise everything has to be figured out, like the PMF that we're always chasing. Okay, coming to the last segment, which is the rapid fires. So get yourselves ready. Start. Good to go. Early bird or night owl?
Night owl.
Equity or debt financing?
Equity.
Bootstrapping or venture capital?
Venture capital.
One financial tool you use daily?
Wallet.
Favorite financial metric?
Cash flow.
One cost you would never cut?
Financial controller.
Last book you read?
Thinking Fast and Slow.
One tech gadget you can't live without?
My tab.
IPO or stay private?
IPO.
Angel investment or crowdfunding?
Angel investment.
Okay, done. That was a good one. Thank you, Sachin, for being with us here today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Please share it with your friends who may find it valuable. See you soon.